When DeWanna Bonner left the Indiana Fever midseason, the headlines focused on her destination, not the devastation she left behind. But Caitlin Clark noticed everything. Clark, alongside Aaliyah Boston, had looked up to Bonner, believing in her veteran example and championship experience. That belief shattered when Lexie Hull stepped up to reveal the truth. Bonner had been working with the Phoenix Mercury all along, planning her exit behind closed doors. Hull's account made it clear Bonner's departure wasn't sudden, it was staged, and it cut deep into the team's morale. What began as a trust-based mentorship quickly twisted into a lesson in betrayal and professionalism. Hull's revelations didn't just expose a player's personal decision. They cracked open a systemic issue. Phoenix's covert maneuvering and tampering tactics brought league ethics into question, while Indiana's response set a different standard. The Fever's young core didn't just survive, they matured. Clark and Boston filled the leadership vacuum not by force, but by fostering openness and accountability within the team. Hull's honesty set the tone for a squad that's no longer naive about the business side of the game. They're driven, informed, and unified, proving that loyalty, not shortcuts, builds lasting championship potential.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Lexie Hull did not hold back. In a new interview that's already sending shockwaves across the WNBA, Hull laid it all out. No filters, no soft language, and definitely no protecting reputations. What she revealed about DeWanna Bonner's mid-season exit from the Indiana Fever wasn't just unexpected. It was a straight-up expose. From the outside, Bonner's departure might have looked like a routine trade or a veteran move to reposition herself. But from inside, according to Hull, it was a gut punch, one that didn't just sting, it tore through the team's morale, trust, and locker room chemistry like a wrecking ball. Bonner was supposed to be the guiding presence, the experienced champion brought in to help lead Indiana's young and promising core. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexie Hull herself. She wasn't just there to fill a stat sheet. She was supposed to set a tone, build something. Instead, she ghosted. Plain and simple. Hull paints a picture of confusion and frustration. Bonner didn't sit the team down. She didn't have that hard conversation. She didn't explain. She just left, quietly, abruptly, without any effort to communicate with the players who had looked up to her. And when you're part of a young team learning how to navigate the chaos of a professional season, that kind of silence doesn't just hurt, it breaks trust. Hull said what most people wouldn't. It felt like betrayal. Because that's exactly what it was. Bonner's exit wasn't some last-minute decision made out of personal stress or fatigue. It wasn't even a mutual parting of ways. Hull claims it was all part of a premeditated scheme, coordinated and executed by the Phoenix Mercury behind the scenes. According to her, Bonner had been in contact with Phoenix long before her departure became official. Tampering, recruiting, conversations that should never have happened. A whole web of under-the-table moves that added up to a calculated hit on a rebuilding franchise. Hull's account is serious. Not dramatic for effect, serious. Because when a rival team is allegedly scheming to lure away a key player in the middle of a season, that doesn't just cross a line. It throws the entire idea of fair play out the window, and it reveals just how far certain teams are willing to go to win. Let's be clear, this wasn't just a talent loss. Bonner wasn't the team's top scorer or franchise centerpiece. What made her exit so damaging was the role she was supposed to play. She was the veteran voice, the one with playoff experience, the one who was trusted to keep the locker room steady while the younger players figured it out. When that voice walks out with zero accountability, it doesn't just affect minutes or rotations. It shakes the entire foundation. And it hit hard. According to Hull, the team felt abandoned. They were left wondering what they did wrong, whether they had misunderstood who Bonner really was, whether any of her mentorship was even sincere. That's a tough thing to sit with, especially when you're in the middle of a season, with cameras on you, expectations rising, and the spotlight hotter than ever thanks to Caitlin Clark's rookie year. Hull didn't sugarcoat it. Bonner's departure made people question everything. Not just her integrity, but the integrity of the league. Because if Phoenix was involved in a coordinated recruitment scheme behind the Fever's back, and no one stopped it, what does that say about the league standards? About how protected young teams really are? It's not just a Bonner issue. It's a WNBA issue. Hull's honesty shines a light on a much bigger problem. Tampering and unethical recruitment tactics are quietly poisoning the league's competitive balance. And for a team like Indiana, who's been building slowly, intentionally, and with real chemistry, that kind of manipulation hits especially hard. Because the Fever weren't doing flashy, short-term moves. They were building for the long haul, bringing in players who care, who connect, who believe in the process. Bonner was supposed to be a piece of that vision. But according to Hull, her loyalty was never to the team. It was to herself. And maybe worst of all, the exit didn't come with any closure. No final meeting. No acknowledgement of the damage left behind. Just silence, which left the younger players, especially those like Clark and Boston, with a bitter taste and an early education in what it really means to survive in professional sports. But if there's one thing this story proves, it's that adversity doesn't have to break a team. Hull made it clear the betrayal became fuel. It forced players like Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston to step up fast, to find their voice, to fill the leadership vacuum left behind, and rally the team not just to survive, but to grow. Hull described how the locker room changed almost overnight. No more depending on a veteran to set the tone. Now, it was about ownership, communication, tough conversations, and even tougher accountability. The kind of growth you don't usually see until years into a career. Indiana was living it in real time. And the shift? It worked. The chemistry got tighter. Players leaned on each other. Not just in games, but off the court too. They reorganized, regrouped, and started playing like a team that had something to prove. Because they did. They had to prove that they didn't need veteran lip service to be strong. That real leadership could come from the young core. That commitment, not clout, builds winners. And according to Hull, that realization changed everything. She called it a turning point, one that redefined their entire identity, one that turned a betrayal into a lesson and a loss into a mission. Hull's interview didn't just recount what happened. It exposed it. It drew a line. She said what needed to be said. This kind of behavior, this kind of manipulation, this kind of abandonment, it can't be allowed to go unchecked. And it shouldn't. Because if the league doesn't take tampering seriously, this won't be the last time it happens. And if players can jump ship mid-season without any accountability, what message does that send to the teams who are actually trying to build something honest? Hull's message was clear. Indiana's done being naive. They've learned that integrity has to be earned. That not every player who walks in with a resume deserves your trust. And that in professional sports, honesty still matters, even when it's not easy. And despite the chaos, the Fever aren't rattled. They're locked in. Lexie Hull, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell. These women are building something that doesn't need to hide behind veteran names. Something built on communication, respect, and real accountability. No smoke, no mirrors. And with their eyes now fully open, they're moving forward stronger than ever. This isn't just a comeback story, it's a warning. To any team thinking they can poach, tamper, or manipulate, Indiana's watching. And they've already survived the worst you can throw at them. So now it's their turn. If you're following this saga and rooting for a team that turned betrayal into bonding, let us know what you think in the comments. Should there be harsher consequences for tampering? Did Bonner cross the line? Or was this just the ugly side of sports business? Like if you're here for players holding the league accountable, share with someone who's slept on Indiana's glow-up, and subscribe to stay locked in. Because this story isn't over. And the Fever? They're just heating up. Lexie Hull's words didn't just spark conversations. They exposed a pressure point the WNBA has been quietly avoiding for years. Tampering has always been one of those whispers around the league. Everyone knows it happens. No one wants to be the one to say it. But now, there's no ignoring it. Not when a respected young player is calling it out in public. Because what Hull revealed wasn't just a betrayal by a player. It was a betrayal by system. A system that let the Phoenix Mercury undermine a team's rebuild in broad daylight, with zero warning and no consequences, at least not yet. According to Hull, this wasn't some quick, opportunistic deal. This was deliberate, premeditated, a long-term plan. Phoenix didn't just take Bonner. They groomed her exit, quietly, behind closed doors, while she was still in the Fever locker room, while she was still being relied on as a leader. That's the part that stings. She was still pretending to be a part of this team while planning her departure in secret, still clapping during huddles, still nodding along during strategy sessions, still acting like she was invested. And then, without so much as a proper goodbye, she was out. What does that do to a locker room? It dismantles trust. It creates second-guessing. Suddenly, players are looking over their shoulders, wondering who else isn't really there. Who else is smiling during practice but texting another team after hours? Who else is playing both sides? Hull's account painted a clear picture. This wasn't just about the pain of losing Bonner. It was about the fracture that kind of betrayal creates. One that doesn't heal with a trade or a win streak. And yet, somehow, Indiana turned that fracture into fuel. Let's be honest. Most young teams would have crumbled. A core that young, with that much pressure already on their shoulders, this could have been the kind of drama that derails a season, turns players against each other, destroys momentum. But not here. Instead, it lit a fire. Hull, Clark, Boston, Mitchell, but didn't back down. It didn't spiral. They regrouped. They talked. They reset expectations. And they made a decision. No more depending on borrowed leadership. They were going to lead themselves. Hull described how those first few weeks post-Bonner were brutal. There was uncertainty, disappointment, even anger. But then something clicked. Roles shifted. Voices got louder. Players who once deferred started speaking up. And suddenly, the Fever weren't just surviving. They were transforming. Caitlin Clark stepped into the pressure like she was built for it. Not just as a scorer, but as someone who understood the emotional pulse of a team. She made it a point to lead by example. Showing up early, staying late, pulling teammates aside when things got tense. Aaliyah Boston did the same in her own way. Less vocal, but steady. Constant. Always present. Always focused. The kind of player who grounds a team just by being in the room. And Lexie? She became the one who kept the team honest. The one willing to say the hard things out loud. The one who looked around and said, "This isn't right," and "I'm not going to pretend it is." That kind of leadership can't be faked. It's not about stats. It's not about clout. It's about showing up day after day when no one's watching. And the result? A completely new team dynamic. Hull said the locker room started to feel different. The energy changed. There was more accountability, more openness, less ego. Without Bonner's looming absence clouding everything, the team started playing free. Playing for each other. Not in the shadow of a big name, but as a collective. And that's when the wins started coming. Now, was every game perfect? No. This team's still growing. Still figuring it out. But what's undeniable is the shift in how they play. How they move. How they support one another. It's the kind of chemistry you can't buy. And the best part? It's real. Built from the rubble of a painful exit. Built from truth-telling. Built from players deciding that integrity matters more than optics. That trust matters more than status. That's what Hull's interview really represents. A stand for integrity in a league that desperately needs more of it. Because when players like Bonner walk out mid-season under shady circumstances and nothing gets said, it sets a dangerous precedent. It tells young players that loyalty doesn't matter. That commitment can be thrown out the window the moment a better offer comes in. That you can pretend to be a leader and vanish the second it's convenient. And Hull isn't having that. She didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for every player who's ever been blindsided by teammates double-dealing. For every locker room that's been left picking up the pieces. For every young team that's trying to do things the right way and keeps getting punished for it. She made it clear, the WNBA has a tampering problem. And until the league steps up with actual oversight and consequences, it's going to keep happening. Good teams are going to keep getting gutted from the inside. And trust, the most valuable currency in team sports, is going to keep losing value. But the Indiana Fever? They're done playing that game. They've already been through it. Already survived the worst kind of betrayal. And they came out of it tougher, smarter, more connected than ever. Now, they've got a clear identity. Built not on one superstar, but on unity. built not on reputation, but on actual leadership. The kind that stays when it's hard. The kind that shows up every single day. The kind that doesn't just talk about culture, it lives it. That's what makes this team dangerous now. Not just their talent, but their character. Because when you've already seen what fake leadership looks like, you learn fast how to spot the real thing. And this group? They've got it. Clark's composure. Boston's presence. Hull's clarity. Mitchell's experience. It's all clicking. The Fever aren't chasing headlines. They're building a legacy. One that's rooted in resilience, shaped by hard lessons, and driven by a shared desire to prove that loyalty, honesty, and grit still matter. Lexie Hull's interview wasn't just a clapback. It was a mission statement. It said, "We're not here to be played with. We've been burned, and we're still standing. We've been blindsided, and we're still building. We know what betrayal feels like, and we're not afraid to face it, name it, and grow stronger from it." So if you're a team thinking you can mess with the Fever's chemistry again, good luck. They've already been through the fire, and now they're the ones holding the torch. Lexie Hull didn't just peel back the curtain. She ripped it down, set it on fire, and walked away holding the match. And now, the league has no choice but to look directly at what's burning. Because here's the reality. What she exposed isn't just a messy player departure or a locker room rift. It's a systemic failure. A veteran player orchestrating a mid-season exit with another team behind the scenes? That's not just a bad look. That's a breach of everything a league should stand for. Trust, fairness, accountability. But what happens when none of that is enforced? According to Hull, Bonner didn't just abandon the team. She manipulated the process. The Phoenix Mercury didn't wait for the offseason. They didn't make a transparent, above-board pitch. No, they waited until Indiana had invested time, trust, and team culture into Bonner, and then pulled the rug out from under them. Quietly, strategically, selfishly. That's not just gamesmanship. That's sabotage. And if you're a fan of team sports, you know exactly how dangerous that kind of betrayal can be. It doesn't just affect box scores or standings. It corrodes the soul of a team. When the person who is supposed to be leading you ends up walking away without a word, you start questioning everything. Hull said it best. It shattered trust. And when you're a young team trying to grow, try to build something sustainable, that kind of fracture doesn't just sting, it lingers. It echoes in every post-game interview, every timeout, every huddle where someone doesn't speak up because they're still wondering if their voice actually matters. That was the damage Bonner left behind. But this story isn't just about the mess. It's about what happened after. Because the Fever didn't let that fracture define them. They didn't let the betrayal sink them. In fact, it became a turning point, a defining moment. Hull described how the team had to look each other in the eye and decide, are we going to fall apart? Or are we going to take control of our identity? And they chose the hard road. No veteran safety net. No leadership by default. Just a locker room full of players deciding that they were going to be the foundation now. That they would write the next chapter of Indiana Fever basketball on their terms. And that's when something really powerful happened. Caitlin Clark stepped up, not just as a scorer, but as a communicator. A connector. The spotlight has been on her since day one. But this was different. This was leadership through chaos. And she delivered. Aaliyah Boston brought the steadiness. A player who doesn't just talk the talk, but plays with a poise that holds the team together in high-pressure moments. Her presence became a stabilizer. Lexie Hull, she became the truth teller. The one who wouldn't let anyone pretend this was normal. The one who dared to say out loud what so many were feeling, and did it with clarity, strength, and conviction. And then there was Kelsey Mitchell, quietly one of the most consistent veterans in the league. Her voice, her work ethic, her fire, it's the kind of presence that keeps a team grounded when everything around them is shifting. This group didn't just fill the gap Bonner left. They redefined what leadership looked like. They made it clear, leadership isn't about age or accolades. It's about showing up. It's about who's there when things get hard. Who's willing to have the uncomfortable conversations. Who stays when it's easier to walk away. And while Bonner chose to dip out without a word, the Fever stayed. They leaned in. They dug deeper. Hull's interview was raw, but it was also affirming. It confirmed what Indiana fans already suspected. that this team is building something real, something honest, something that can't be shaken by shady departures or tampering schemes. It also raised questions that the league can't ignore anymore. Because if a player can be recruited out of a team midseason with zero transparency and no consequences, what message does that send? What happens to the teams that are actually trying to do things the right way? What happens to the young players who look around and realize loyalty and integrity don't seem to matter as much as backdoor deals? Hull's account is a warning flare. She's not calling for drama. She's calling for accountability. And she's right to do it. Because if the WNBA wants to keep growing, it has to protect its players, its teams, its culture. It can't let star power become a shield for manipulation. It can't let winning justify everything. That's what makes this story so important. It's not just about a betrayal, it's about values. Indiana didn't just get played. They got a first-hand education in the politics of professional sports. And instead of folding, they turned it into fuel. They became tighter, sharper, hungrier. The trust that was broken by one player became an opportunity to build a new kind of bond. One built not on status, but on shared experience and honest communication. And now, the Fever are more dangerous than ever. Not because of one standout star, but because of what they've built together. You can't fake that kind of chemistry. You can't buy it. And you sure as hell can't poach it. That's the irony in all of this. Phoenix may have gotten the player, but Indiana got the clarity, the unity, the strength that only comes from going through hell together and coming out the other side more connected than ever. Lexie Hull's words weren't just a takedown. They were a blueprint, a declaration of what this team is about moving forward. No more illusions. No more relying on outside saviors. This team is self-made now, built from experience, hardened by betrayal, fueled by belief. They know who they are, and more importantly, they know who they're not. They're not interested in shortcuts. They're not chasing headlines. They're building something slower, deeper, and more powerful, something that lasts. So if you've been sleeping on the Fever, wake up, because what's happening in Indiana isn't just a rebuild. It's a rebirth, and it's being led by players who've seen what fake leadership looks like and chose something better. If this story hit you like it hit us, let us know in the comments. Do you think the Mercury crossed a line? Should there be a real investigation into tampering? Was Bonner's exit just business, or was it betrayal? Like if you believe real leadership is earned, not inherited. Share this if you're rooting for the rise of Indiana's young core. And hit that subscribe button if you want more unfiltered stories about the drama, loyalty, and chaos behind the headlines. Because this league never sleeps, and neither do we.